And good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Steve Schmidt with The Warning, joined by Malcolm Nance, Black Man Spy, and Ken Harbaugh of The Ken Harbaugh Show. Good morning, guys.
Great to be with you, Steve.
Morning.
A lot of things to talk about. Let's start with the dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base, where Donald Trump could not be bothered to take off his MAGA merchandise hat. There he is. The guy has stolen $4 billion at least in crypto and other things, and he still can't get a suit properly tailored. It is extraordinary. The great schlub of the White House. But there we see J.D. Vance, Melania Trump, Steve Witkoff, Susie Wiles. These people will be remembered as some of the great villains in American history, but they hold power, at least in this moment. What do you guys see when you see this picture? Let me start with you, Ken.
Literally wearing campaign swag at the final return of brothers in arms, brothers and sisters in arms of me and Malcolm. And I don't know if you saw this, Steve, but even Fox News was appalled enough that they spliced in previous footage of him attending another dignified transfer without the campaign swag on. I think everyone realizes how outrageous this is, but there was a Fox morning show that cut away from this clip and found another clip of him without the campaign swag on. I mean, the entire presidency to Donald Trump seems to be an exercise in marketing and grift. And any chance he has to sell something to his few remaining devoted followers, he'll take it, even when it's the return of American bodies.
Malcolm?
Yeah, I'm just sitting here steaming. Ken was being quite respectful in that respect. But, that's what I expect from a naval aviator pilot and an officer. I am a senior chief petty officer. I would not have allowed that for 1/10 of 1 second. I would have made sure that someone on the Joint Chiefs knew for him to take his freaking cover off, right? He may be commander-in-chief, but that is not the uniform of the commander-in-chief. He should have had enough dignity to remove his cover, but he didn't. And as you see in that photograph, he's there checking his colostomy bags or his pump or whatever it is in there. I've gone to that dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base for lost service members. And it's a very solemn ceremony. I think this might be his second or third in the last 10 years that he ever attended. And I recall after the first two, one family member of a fallen SEAL berated him, and he said he was never going to another one. He was dragged out for this one. So I'm sorry, this man should not even be anywhere near the controls of power. Unfortunately, the people of the United States made this decision, and we're stuck with him. But we're stuck with all his indignities, we're stuck with his cravenness, and we're stuck with his ego. And that's, I'm sorry, I personally would not have, I would have gone off on somebody loudly.
Kenny Donnelly was the was an advisor to JFK, and if you've worked advising these guys, you've worked in campaigns. Kenny Donnelly was a hero to us all. Kenny Donnelly had a mission in mind for life, and it was to be the first person in the Oval Office every morning to tell the President of the United States, John Kennedy, he was full of shit about something. And before we turn into the details of the war, I'll tell you what I see in that picture is that there is nobody around Donald Trump, not the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff,
right,
not the White House chief of staff, not his vice president, none of them, who can tell him he's wrong about anything. Nobody can tell him, take the hat off. Nobody. And so you have a very dangerous situation when you have an American president who is bound only by the dimensions of his own narcissistic ego. And it's astonishing. And so here we are 9 days into war with Iran, and it is going, I suspect, the way that I see it, very much like we talked about, which is that wars cannot be won by air power alone. There has not been a popular uprising in Iran under Israeli and American bombardment. This war has metastasized already. There are 15 nations involved in it that are under fire from Iran. The Straits of Hormuz are effectively closed. There is a profound shock to the price of oil in global markets, and all of that will be coming home. It seems to me that Donald Trump has put himself in a corner. He either retreats and the Iranian regime holds power and he loses this war on the terms that he introduced it, or he escalates. And what escalation looks like is, to me at least, is a full commitment by American forces. And our Army isn't large enough. Our Marine Corps isn't large enough. So we'll need all of the reserve components, and there'll be talk before long about a draft. But 9 days into this, the fork of the road is very clear to me, at least, which is we're either going to dramatically escalate or we're going to try to walk out of this. And when you look and you see a Lindsey Graham with Maria Bartiromo this morning talking about this is the best money we've ever spent, I can't imagine anybody more delusional. And here we are. Ken?
Malcolm and I called this from day one. The Iranians are not going to fight this war on our terms. Their military never had a chance, and we knew that from the beginning. Their navy was going to be sunk within 2 weeks. Their air defenses were going to be obliterated. We were going to achieve air dominance over Iran, but that is not how you provoke regime change in a country like Iran, and that was never planned for. We're already hearing that the clerics have settled on another Ayatollah. It's Ayatollahs all the way down if you haven't laid the groundwork for a popular uprising. And we missed the chance for that months ago. Who do you think fills a power vacuum in a country like Iran when you've taken out the senior leadership? It's the people with the money and the resources and the guns. And that's the IRGC. It's no longer the Iranian resistance, if it ever was. And if you need any more evidence that the Trump regime had no plan going into this, look at the status of U.S. Oil reserves, the strategic emergency petroleum reserves that should be filled up for an occasion like this, and is at one of the lowest points in decades. Look at the Straits of Hormuz and the total surprise with which the regime was taken at the Iranian closure of the Straits. Look at the attacks on all of our allies and the evacuation of embassies and the closing of some of them across the region. And the president's response is, well, this all happened so quickly. Are you effing kidding me? I'll let Malcolm swear for us, but the idea that you would commit the American military to something like this without planning for attacks on embassies or keeping the Straits of Hormuz open, or at least replenishing our oil reserves here at home, it is the worst kind of negligence when it comes to taking the nation to war.
Malcolm?
Yeah, my first deployment to the Persian Gulf was 38 years ago. I did the math. That's how old I am. The first protest I ever went to was in 1979 when I protested the taking of hostages by the Iranians. This is peppered by career direct naval combat, ship-to-ship warfare with the Iranians in 1988. I've been studying this forever, saw the Iran-Iraq War. All of this is to show that this history, 47 years that we've had in confrontation with Iran, preparing to protect the Arabian Gulf / Persian Gulf, whatever you choose, right? First was the folly of us invading Iraq, which gave Iran a hardcore Shia Muslim base that's there now, sitting like a sword of Damocles over the U.S. And now we attack the country directly. We prepared for this for 47 years. And the idiots that planned this, if you want to use the word planning, that fashioned this, missed their mark. If this was about doing a popular uprising and regime change, that was January. They could have carried out limited strikes. They could have carried out operations against the IRGC police stations and things like that. They could have sunk the Iranian Navy. These are of no consequence now. The country is 93 million people. There is 125,000 full-time Revolutionary Guardsmen. There are 600,000 to 800,000 Bashji paramilitary who are on call at all times. These are the people that killed upwards to 30,000 or more civilians in January. And what are we doing? We are out there toying with making an Kurdish insurgency in the north. Trump said, oh, I don't want to do that. That's too complicated. That's over with. We're talking about doing amphibious or special forces landings on the territory, the mainland, or the islands of the Persian Gulf now. You can do that, but there are still missing 600 anti-ship missiles, 33,000 small boats, and a commando force that numbers in the hundreds of thousands that could come back and make all of this insanely painful. Why do I even project these things? Because we have been planning for them since I was in my 20s. And I'm 64 now, and I see we have literally wasted all of the tools, tradecraft, and planning necessary to degrade the regime in such a way that you have regime collapse. We don't have that option anymore. Now it's either direct warfare with Iran, or we do essentially what we did in Iraq for 10 years. Fly over it 24/7, 365 and drop bombs whenever we see an anti-aircraft gun or a new Ayatollah who comes into power. This is ludicrous. This is the definition of a forever war unless we declare victory and leave.
And Malcolm, we're not even talking. Sorry, Steve, you had.
No, go ahead, Ken.
Something. The one thing Iranians have, in addition to 4 times as many people compared to Iraq, is the potential for a dirty bomb. Right? They have uranium, enriched uranium, which, by the way, the deal under Obama, the JCPOA, would have brought out of the country. That's moot at this point. Donald Trump scrapped it because it was Obama's deal, not because it was a bad deal. But there is no way to control that with air power. I think one of the reasons that Donald Trump is finally teasing the idea of boots on the ground is that he's got himself in a corner now with an Iranian regime that has nothing to lose by taking some of that fissile material and doing something horrific with it. And the only way to address that is with boots on the ground. If there was ever an imminent threat from Iran to the U.S., it wasn't before we launched this attack. It's now. I was with Senator Duckworth as she was coming out of that classified briefing, and every Democrat in that briefing reiterated that there was no imminent threat to the United States. The best rationale and the most Orwellian rationale was given by Secretary Rubio when he said that America had to attack because Israel was going to attack, and that would provoke an Iranian response on American forces. Ergo, we had to bomb Iran first to defend against Iran.
Okay, that's minus. Can I make a quick comment there real quick, Steve?
Yeah.
There is a worse scenario here. They've got 450 pounds of 60% enriched uranium-235, right? That is enough. Half of it's enough to make a test bed 1 or 2 kilogram of fissible atomic bomb. But it would be on World War II levels, right? It would be on the size of, Fat Man and Little Boy, the bombs in World War II. They are trying to get down to one they can put on a warhead. But if they were to just run off to the Beluch Desert and blow off an atomic bomb right now using a crude atomic bomb, that would get everyone's attention, and it would change the entire dynamic of this. They're not going to do that. they have enough asymmetric capability to make us all pay for a very long time, not just at the gas pump, but in bodies. And they are holding their powder dry.
They are.
It is an astonishing moment that when you consider in January, we had the ability to fire cruise missiles and destroy the Iranian Revolutionary Guard headquarters, other regime targets. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people were on the streets. Would have been a powerful, potent message from the American people, but it was not taken. And there is no signs that 9 days into this, that there is any internal upheaval in Iran. There is no protest on the streets. There is no call to bring the regime down that's visible thus far. You agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. And especially considering the fact, as Malcolm laid out, the real power center in Iran is the IRGC. In some ways, they're worse than the Ayatollahs. They've got all the guns, they have all the money. The IRGC is a crime syndicate, but entrenched throughout Iranian society. And they don't hang out at the headquarters, especially during wartime. They hang out at the cafes. They are embedded throughout society, and to take them out, you got to do an Iraq-style, boots on the ground, full invasion, which this administration doesn't have the stomach for. I don't have the stomach for it, but that's what they've bid off if regime change is truly what they want.
You know, I've spent a career around politicians at all sorts of different levels of service, up to the president of the United States, senior American officials. I've seen a lot of them under pressure. I've seen a lot of them in moments where they had to extemporize something. I was struck by the Democrats coming out of the classified briefing that you just referenced with Senator Duckworth, and specifically two senators, Murphy and Warren. And Warren, who is a pretty polished performer, I thought on her video talking about it, it was just very raw. And you could see that whatever she heard in there, she was very rattled by. Same with Chris Murphy. Chris Murphy walked out of there and he was basically, you know, in this posture, like, oh my God, I can't even tell you the bullshit I just heard in there, other than to signal to you that it was weapons grade bullshit, and it's really rattled me. What was take us a little inside Senator Duckworth's composure. She's a combat veteran, wounded American helicopter pilot, grievously wounded American helicopter pilot. She's a steely, nervy person. What was her disposition coming out of that meeting when they went into all the classified details?
There is no one in Congress, in the House or Senate, who understands the cost of war better than Senator Tammy Duckworth. And I could tell that what she was trying to suppress was this fear about her friends, our friends, going downrange because this president thought this was going to be another Venezuela operation. In fact, we have some reporting that he said to his combatant commanders and to the Secretary of Defense, I want to do this like Venezuela.
Oh,
Venezuela's in our backyard. It is a fraction of the size. It doesn't have nearly the military capability of Iran. And I mean, there are analogs throughout history about learning the wrong lessons from your wins. I think this administration learned all of the wrong lessons from Venezuela. They thought they could get away with a quick one. And man, Malcolm, I'd love your perspective on this, but I think this is one of those moments where the military should have been pushing back. Then again, the military is doing its job. It's doing it pretty remarkably, but the State Department and the administration and the civilian leadership are completely failing both the American people and the military that it sends to fight these wars.
Well, certainly the military is very professional. However, there's some things that the American public needs to know. Number one, these are not unlawful orders to carry out these operations against Iran. Again, this is 47 years. We have now culminated 47 years of preparation and military operations and lessons learned about what we were going to do. We developed bombs specifically for those nuclear program bunkers. We used them last year. Now we have nothing. We developed operational strategies for Iran, but you can drop, we like to say it's bombs, guns, and fighter jet rides all day long. But to what end? To what end? Look, I'm an intelligence professional. I've dealt with some real stupid commanders in my life, right? And again, as a Navy chief, I have the right to come up and say, hey, I'm going to tell you real quick there, boss, this is stupid and it's going to cost service members' lives, but you make the choice. And they generally sit back and give it a thought about it. That's not how this is being done in the Trump administration. His policy guidance is right here in his head. We are watching pure mental illness masquerade as foreign policy. It's cost, right now, the current counts 1,300 dead in Iran, over 6,000 wounded, 11 Israelis, 6 U.S. service members, 18 people in the Emirates, 378 Lebanese, which is a new war Netanyahu has started. But what we're doing is we're affecting policy. Benjamin Netanyahu said back when I was 25 years old, this is now the United States being led around on a stick by Benjamin Netanyahu. And his statement yesterday, where he said, the United States doesn't have to do it, Israel will kill any leader chosen in Iran. So now what do? We don't have the sanctity of borders anymore. We don't have the authority to allow leadership to exist, right? It's now an assassination festival. And now today, Israel last night, and I'm not down on the Israelis, right? But they bombed all the refineries and oil field around the city. And the people who would be having a revolution are having oil covered rain fall on their city. Sewers and gutters are catching fire, literally on fire, and they are choking in a gas, and phosgene levels in water is making Tehran's water reservoir undrinkable. That's a war crime. I would have kicked anyone's butt whoever suggested that we do something as stupid as that. Well, it's done, and now those people are going to look at us. Even if Israel did it, they're going to blame Trump on all their hardship. There's not going to be a revolution here.
Let's talk about the generals. There's a difference between a 3-star and a 4-star that you all know about, even though probably most of the people listening really don't discern too much of the difference. And I say that I had an experience in my career. If I had to stack up the 10 biggest fucking morons I've ever worked with, I have a retired former 4-star I put in at the bronze medal position. Maybe on any given day he'd sleep to 4. But I often ask myself, holy shit, how did this guy become a 4-star general in the U.S. military? And I think there are more of them than I was inclined to believe. One thing I know is true is that there were more general officers in Baghdad in 2007 than there were in Europe on VE Day. So let's talk about the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff here for a second. He was a retired 3-star. He did not have a 4th star in his retirement rank. We don't know the full details of the story, but Raising Cane came back to active service when Trump nominated him. He got his 4th star. He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What are our expectations for him right now? There have been no resignations by a senior military leader regarding this mission. We think that this is a disaster. I don't have any doubt that every detail of what happened and what advice was given and what advice was ignored is all going to is all going to come out. But this war that has, as you pointed out, Malcolm, these are not illegal orders. The commander in chief has the authority constitutionally, legally, to order the United States military to attack. Congress has powers, the war powers acts and others. They control the power of the purse. They have a lot of remedies there, but as such as what we've seen so far, all lawful. How should we look at General Kane? How should we think about the commanders around Donald Trump that have enabled this, that have initiated this? There are not a lot of leaks coming out of the Pentagon that show any dissent, any discomfort with the war plan. We see back in the Vietnam War, the news conferences were called in Saigon, the 5 o'clock follies. We see a version of the 5 o'clock follies every time that the military convenes in a news conference with Pete Hegseth and the two of them standing up there together. General Kane doesn't seem to be embarrassed standing next to Pete Hegseth, so far as I can tell. How should we think about our senior military leadership in this moment?
Well, I got to say, my expectations of Chairman Kane were very low going in, because his main qualification seems to have been that he was wearing a MAGA hat when he first met Donald Trump, and that he said to him, "I will kill for you, sir." Now, there's, I think, some skepticism around that story. The president claims that the chairman said, "I will kill for you, sir." But the fact that General Kane did not challenge that General Kane has at no point said, "Actually, I work for the Constitution. My oath is to support and defend that, not to support and defend the whims of a president." That to me was a warning flare about this chairman. Not the fact that he had 3 stars instead of 4, but that he was chosen because he was a Trump loyalist. Now, within the military, there have been some folks who are pleasantly surprised, at least up until the Iran war, that he wasn't bloodthirstier than we thought he might be. But I think this is going to be the real test. And for a person in that position, the test isn't just, are you going to disobey the first unlawful order you get? It's, are you going to push back on the president for stupid orders? There's lawful but stupid orders, right? And it is the job at that level of an administration to filter that BS from getting down to the Malcolm Nances and the Ken Harbaughs, who have to follow those stupid but lawful orders. It is the chairman's job, it is the Joint Chief's job, it is the combatant commander's job to say, I'll do that because it's lawful, but you got to think twice. And I'm not sure that pushback is happening, but I'm not that surprised, because there has been this purge throughout the military. Hegseth has been the purger in chief, and it's the generals, but it's also the JAGs, the conscience of the military. And you have Hegseth proudly saying, we're not going to engage in stupid, direct quote, stupid rules of engagement. What that means is, that is the same rationale that led to Nuremberg, right? We're not going to engage in stupid rules engagement per this DOD. And if there is criticism from the military, it's not because we care about our troops. I'm sorry. If there is criticism from the media of the military, it's just to make President Trump look bad. It's not because we care about what is happening. If the president is asked about those, the Russians providing targeting information to the Iranians to kill Americans, he calls it a stupid question. There's no better question to ask the president right now. But they cannot countenance any kind of criticism. And the minute it happens from the media, it's considered, or it's treated by this administration as unpatriotic. That is the least patriotic thing of all, the refusal to justify why Americans are dying.
Malcolm?
Yeah. General Kane has actually been the most stable thing about this operation. I watch his briefings, but it's clear. A couple of things are clear to me. First off, that anecdotal story about "I will kill for you." General Kane was an Air Force general from Air Force Special Operations Command. So he was part of their, the spear tip of helicopters, aircraft, parajumpers, and joint terminal attack controllers, right? Who facilitate special operations missions, who go out there. So he knows what he's doing. And that phrase, I will kill for you, I absolutely, without any question, believe that, right? These people are ideologues. And even though he, as a general, now is in charge of the entire shebang, this guy is no Colin Powell. This guy is no Norman Schwarzkopf. Worst PowerPoint briefer I've ever seen. He instills no feeling of the seriousness of what's going on with service members, or imparts intelligence or information to the American public that you would listen to. That's what Pete Hegseth's job, Whiskey Pete's job, right, is to be there, to be the cheerleader with the big bullhorn that says victory at, in Iran, and to do everything so that the president is the point man for this. I served all through Desert Storm. We watched the briefings out of Washington and out of Riyadh in real time, in or near combat, before we kicked off that war. Information, and felt we were being led by real leaders. We rarely ever saw George Herbert Walker Bush. We saw the battle commanders leading. What I got here is I got essentially a guy from the comic book Archie, right, out there rah-rahing about lethality and kill, and this is what we do in eliminating people. But all of this they are all just step ladders, bats that Donald Trump stands on, like a golden idol, sitting out there thinking he's Kim Jong-un, right? With a bunch of cheerleading, clapping generals who are like a bunch of SEALs. I'm glad I'm not hearing anything from the flag ranks right now, because things could go bad. They could get very sideways here. The attacks on all these Gulf states, these are not accidents. This is a battle plan. The Iranians had a folder: upon case of death, you will hit this, strike all of these things. Retain as much capability. Do not let the they knew they were going to lose their defense, ships, and all of those things. But there's a hell to pay when an American soldier, sailor, airman, marine, or CIA paramilitary operations officer steps foot there and they're detected. Then things are going to get very spicy indeed, very quickly. And people will have to explain it. That Foreign Minister Laranjani right now, this morning, said they captured Americans. I don't believe that, but it's possible. Look, I ran those, I was chief of resistance at the Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape School. And we taught about these scenarios. We had people who had been captured by the Iranians guest speak for us, and the Iraqis and all of our other enemies. And it is going to happen because right now it appears Pete Hegseth, and not here getting any pushback from General Kane, wants to carry out some sort of demonstration on the Iranian territory, whether it's landing Marines on Qasem Island, Larak Island, Hormuz Island, Kish Island, or seizing Kark Island oil terminal in the north, or doing a Ranger raid into Natanz in there with 100 or 200 Rangers. They want to use the toys. And anything I've learned in my career is never use any system that is, or take the risk that does not actually achieve the terminal objectives of this war. And since none of us knows what that is, it's just, bombs, subs, and helicopter rides.
It's a game, Steve. It's a game to them. If folks have not seen these videos released by the White House, I'll make this quick, Steve. These videos released by the White House, literally splicing in video game footage and Avengers movies with bomb camera footage of Iranian targets being blown up. It's the most disgusting thing I've seen since I joined the Navy.
I'd slap a guy. I mean, that's what chiefs have the blade hand for.
I want you to talk about this at a individual level, and then we'll expand it out. There have been reports about military commanders saying things before the battle began to their troops, such as, Donald Trump is the signal light of Jesus Christ, who has been sent to begin the battle that leads to the end times and Armageddon and this and that. In one report, the commander who's doing it has a messianic grin on his face, which, according to one of the NCOs who filed the anonymous complaint, made him look even crazier. And if you're sitting there, did you ever experience any of that in the military? I mean, there's been reported problems with the Christian nationalism in the Air Force Academy. Famously, they've had a lot of issues out there. There's been plenty of articles written about this strain inside the officer corps of the military. Pete Hegseth is obviously what he is, a five-star religious nutter, a Christian nationalist. His crazy Christian nationalist pastor, his comments about blacks, about women are all documented. But did you guys ever experience that? And what would your reaction be if you were sitting on active service today and you heard that speech has been reported? Go to you first, Ken.
I did not experience that personally, but I do want to offer a very personal take on how this is affecting me and my buddies. And I'll give you two triggers, if you will. The first was seeing that people within Trump's orbit had bet on the war. That you saw in literally the hours before the first bombs, minutes before the first bombs started to fall, the betting on poly market surged. People have literally been making a killing off of when the bombs would begin to rain down. And look, I know there will always be war profiteers. War has always been an opportunity since time immemorial for the few to make money off of the misery of the many. But Malcolm and I, even though in the back of our heads we knew that the prime contractors and others were going to see an increase in stock price, we never had to deal with betting markets deciding when the war was going to start or tipping off our adversaries about when the first bombs were going to fall. And the fact that is happening, those bets are being placed by accounts that have been opened in the last day or two with names like MAGA My Man. It is chilling. It is absolutely chilling. And the other thing, even more personal, is thinking about, Malcolm and I are both sailors, the USS Cole. And I keep going back to that because this is a ship with a weapon system that, including its picket ships, was the best weapon system in the history of the world at taking down incoming missiles. Is that how the Iranians nearly sunk it? Or is that how the attackers nearly sunk it? No, they pulled a tug up to it. We got to think about the Iranian way of war and stop high-fiving ourselves that we've taken out their missile capability or achieved air dominance. That's not how this war is going to go for the Iranians. And I wish Pete Hegseth had read Sun Tzu. I wish General Kane. And I mean, we know what Donald Trump's bedside bookshelf looks like. I guarantee you Sun Tzu's not on it. But unless you force yourself to think like your enemy, you're going to lose. And for all of the early wins in this war so far, I don't think the long-term version of this is going to play out well for the United States.
Malcolm?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where and when anyone has thought they could get away with giving anything other than the most cursory prayers and appeal to a generic God, right? In my 20 years in the military and then my post-military career where I was a intelligence contractor, never heard anyone appeal to heaven. All right. Definitely never speak to any soldier or as the commander in chief as a messianic savior. Right. The first part of this problem is that the senior NCO in that room should have said, "Sir, a word. right? And taken this out into the hallway and said, our Jewish sailors or soldiers, sailors, airmen, our Muslim soldiers, sailors, airmen, our Buddhists, our atheists, this is not the way we do it, right? Should I remind you of what your oath of office swears you to the Constitution of the United States, right? And somebody should have had that talk with him. And people went and complained. That man is not going to be relieved of his command. He's going to be promoted and he'll probably be elected congressman on the MAGA ticket because Trump rewards people who violate the Constitution for him, who violate the Uniform Code of Military Justice for him. He's going to make the next rank, right? He's the problem we had at the Air Force Academy, where turns out the Air Force Academy was a cabal of fundamentalist Christians who didn't believe in the Enlightenment era, non-Christian dominant Constitution of the United States, but their own belief that they were forming an army for God, their God, against Muslim gods. It's nutty. And that's why we have people who are supposed to be the arbiters of common sense. And in this administration, right, traitors and idiots get rewarded. People with common sense lose their jobs.
One of the ways I deal with all of this is I allow myself to fantasize about the moment when decency is restored and Trump is gone and it is the hour of arrival for cleanup in aisle 5. And I want to say, as imagining a person, myself as a person in that room in the White House or wherever, I would look forward very much to the meeting with the brass, and I'd invite the NFL commissioner to it too. But one of the first things that I would make clear is that it's all over. You won't see another fucking military service member in a uniform at an NFL game again during the years of this. No more flyovers. No more of this performative hoorah patriotism that has gone on for 20 years. And there's going to be an enormous need to clean up the Pentagon in the aftermath of this. Look, talk for a minute about looking ahead to the cleanup on aisle 6 and 7. I mean, I talked about flyovers at NFL games, which drive me crazy, but there's 100 different things, big and small, that you could point to that will need to be done. But all of the things that have happened over the course of this 4 years, when you look ahead to a Pentagon that's going to be in need of substantial reform, where do you start? How do you think about it as a project conceptually?
Steve, I guess first a quick tip of the hat, because I think it was John McCain who first called out the Pentagon and the NFL when it was revealed that those celebrations at the 50-yard line honoring U.S. troops were being paid for by the U.S. military. This wasn't the NFL doing it as a gesture of patriotism. This was another ad campaign. This was Recruiting Command and others in the DoD paying the NFL to honor veterans, which, if you're going to act patriotic, at least do it for free. I don't know. Malcolm?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of thoughts on what should happen with the next Pentagon. God forbid that I should be asked to have anything to do with the. Certainly, let's start with the Secretary of the Navy. We have a guy who was chosen as Secretary of the Navy. He doesn't even have a rubber duck in his bathtub, but he was chosen because he has a collection of erotic art. in his home, and he gave Donald Trump $10 million or something like that in his campaign. And he made the decision to get rid of an entire class of frigates that we desperately need, while the Chinese are building 40 or 50 a year. I mean, let's start there. But let's go to the top. The biggest recalibration that needs to happen is, I don't know whether it needs to be done through legislation, but the Secretary of Defense must have had flag field command, right? Or he must have been somebody who has handled at least $500 billion in budgeting. But it cannot be someone from, I'm not qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And if chosen, I'd be smart enough to say, I don't want the job. I'll take the job for a week. Let's go choose somebody who's qualified. Not these people. These people are literally like the governor in the movie Blazing Saddles, right? Which is Mel Brooks as Governor Latomaine, right? Who's got his secretary is in a dance hall girl costume, right? And all he does is play, paddleball. And, and that famous line of his, if we get found out, we're going to lose our phony baloney jobs. That is the Pentagon. That's the Trump administration in a nutshell. And what we need to do is instill, right, that the adults are in the room. And we need to not just fire everybody. Good example, 22-year-old kid at the Department of Homeland Security, right, who is an intern whose last job was working at a library or something. He was an intern to the Republican Party, is running counterterrorism prevention in America. I'm 65 years old. I've been doing this since I was 19. I've been battling terrorists since I was 20, and I barely think that I'm qualified to do that job. I am now. Now I'm fully qualified to do that job. But we need a clean out. And the first thing the next president of the United States should say, not just about the armed forces, but about America in general, diversity is our strength. I want Pete Hegseth's portrait never to be placed in the Pentagon. Or if they do, I want a black cloth placed over it, over the disgrace that he has brought to the armed forces. The armed forces will acquit themselves well in this war, right? But wait until the first, Osprey special operations tilt rotor goes down with 28 or 30 guys. God forbid any of this happens. I hope this is clean, sanitary, and any more of our service members die before common sense kicks in. But this government, it doesn't need an enema. It needs, prep for a colonoscopy.
And that 22-year-old blogger, Malcolm, who is running counterterrorism for DHS, is about to report to Mark Wayne Mullen, who is in the running for the dumbest senator, right up there with Tommy Tuberville. This is the guy who tried to fight the head of the Teamsters during a Senate hearing and can't even explain in the same press conference whether we're at war or not. I don't know if you've seen that clip, but this guy is going to be running the Department of Homeland Security.
Claims that
I thought there's no way we could do worse than know him.
He's
work.
There are no words. There are no words to characterize appropriately how dumb the guy is. I do think in terms of listening to the conversation, historically, you have not wanted to have a retired general as the Secretary of Defense. I think civilian control is an important principle. We've had multiple waivers signed on this, but I wonder if the reform is as simple as this for the power cabinet positions, that you require a 60 or 65 vote threshold, which maybe imposes a little bit of bipartisanship in the cloakrooms of the Congress. Is that very simply is we're not going to allow for a fucknut to be put into these positions at Homeland Security, the Attorney General. So it's by definition, both sides, as power swaps back and forth, that there's going to be a level of competency that is insisted upon. And if you can get an idiot like a Kristi Noem or a Mark Wayne Mullen or a Pam Bondi confirmed with 65 votes, then maybe there's no hope for us. But I don't think any of these people would have made it through with a 60 vote threshold. And it compels, if you don't have the votes, you don't have the votes. And you can look at that principle playing out now with the Homeland Security funding. You have to have the votes, but we have some of the worst of the worst. And I completely agree with you that that Pete Hegseth's portrait should never be put up in the Pentagon. Shouldn't be put up under the next Democratic president. No Republican who comes back in 12 or 16 years after this disaster ends will ever want to put it up. I don't think that Donald Trump should lie in repose under the Capitol dome that he attacked, the Capitol building. Mm-hmm. I don't think his body should be flown on a presidential aircraft. Personally, I'd be inclined to be as hardcore on these things as anyone could possibly imagine. And I'd debate all day long that it's not pettiness that's at stake. It's national survival, that there has to be a rebuke to all of this. And so I was reading this morning, the state of Maryland, for those familiar with the geography, up the headwaters of the Potomac River, there was a sewage pipe that has burst. It's a federal pipe. It's on D.C. soil. Trump has blamed Maryland for it. But soon, as the weather warms, the Potomac River is one of the dirtiest rivers in the world right now. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of gallons of raw sewage have spilled into it. So as we get ready for the July 4th events, what will be wafting over D.C. is the smell of human shit from the Potomac River at 100 degrees, which seems completely appropriate and perfect, almost in fact divinely inspired if you think about it as we approach the 250th anniversary. Let's hope for a hot day for the UFC fight on June 14. But as we head to the 250th anniversary of the country, we are at war. Donald Trump is completely unhinged. The Congress is completely surrendered its power. Talk about the next couple of months prospectively. Where do you think this all goes? How does this end? How does this wrap up in the Middle East? We have a limited stockpile of the weapons and the munitions. That's been reported and talked about. We certainly don't have the inventory necessary to fight a war in the Pacific. That much is obvious. How do we back out of this? How is Trump going to say that he won the war with the Iranian regime still intact? What do you guys see ahead? Start with you, Ken.
I think he's going to declare victory like he always does and walk away, having made a mess of the region, having put at risk all of our allies and alliances, and the regime will remain in place. My hope is that the American people, and I think this is true, are beginning to wake up to the utter incompetence of this administration in every domain, not just the national security domain, but the immigration domain, the economic domain. It is becoming apparent that this regime doesn't know what it's doing. But what I also hope the American people understand going into November is that incompetence isn't accidental. It's actually a design feature of autocracies throughout history. They thrive, they depend on incompetence. No one is allowed to be more competent or more serious than the clown in chief. And so you get a clown show. And I think if people make that connection, the realization that Donald Trump is to blame for all of this because he cannot bear to be surrounded by competent people, to go back one of your original points, Steve. He cannot bear to have someone walk into the Oval Office on a Monday morning and tell him he is full of it. That is why we're in this mess, because we are led by an incompetent person who demands loyal incompetence from everyone around him. Once the American people realize that, we'll deliver our verdict, and it has to be a massive verdict. We can't just win by 3 or 4 points. We have to win by a landslide, because it is one thing for the president to call the Secretary of State of a state like Georgia and say, find me 11,000 votes. They can get away with that. They very nearly did. It is another thing entirely to have to pick up that phone and find me, 100,000 votes. That's why we need to deliver a massive margin, and with it, a resounding verdict come November.
Malcolm?
Well, for now, I don't think Trump has any interest in an off-ramp. He is enjoying using the toys. He's enjoying the internal adulation that's going on. I'm not joking. He gets to see these cool videos, and Pete Hegseth talk about how macho and manly all this stuff is, right? And that we just lost a few soldiers. Listen, I'm going to tell you a quick something. When we invaded Kuwait in 1991, my operations center, which was my desk in an old building, was in Port Shuaib, that very port. It was me and a small EOD group. That's all that was there. We are still there with the exact same amount of security that we had in 1991, which was nuts. People do not.
Oh, we have lost Malcolm's signal. Ken, are you still there?
I'm still here, yeah.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about that I noticed, and I wondered if you noticed it. We have been subjected to a year of Pete Hegseth propaganda, the workout videos, him carrying the logs with the Navy SEAL teams. We've seen J.D. Vance doing it. None of the Army soldiers killed in action really fit the archetype of Pete Hegseth's G.I. Joe warrior, did they?
No. And I got to tell you, what I'm hearing from inside the military is he used to be the butt of jokes. Now he's a source of shame and in some cases real fear that this is the guy calling the shots. It must have really gutted Pete Hegseth to see the video of that F-15 either pilot or backseater on that beach in Kuwait after ejecting, after having been shot down. And a helpful Kuwaiti local comes up to this pilot and says, do you need any help? Thank you for, flying combat air patrol or whatever they were doing over Kuwait. And it was a woman, a tiny female Air Force aviator, totally the opposite of the Pete Hegseth, Mark Wayne Mullen warrior archetype. I mean, you've got the entire Trump contingent out there beating their chests about how cool war is. In a bloodlusty Hollywood kind of way, Mark Wayne Mullen himself talking about how war smells, how war feels. You can taste it. Guy's never been to war. These are the same guys who put AK-47s in their Christmas cards, right? Real combat vets, folks who have been downrange, they see that stuff, and until we're at war, it's the butt of jokes. Now it is a source of real alarm that these are the clowns, the cosplay clowns who think that this is fun or cool. These are the ones making the decisions about our lives. It's I see the clip up there. Yeah, these videos coming out of the White House. These are not adjacent troll farm accounts. This is the White House of the United States putting out these video game style propaganda pieces celebrating the killing of people. Look, we got to do tough things as a nation sometimes. There are bad guys who deserve to be on the receiving end of JDAMs, but this is not how you show it off.
Malcolm, I was saying before we lost you, I want you to finish up what you were saying, but and then we'll wrap it up. But I made the mention to Ken that when you look at the pictures, the photographs of the Army soldiers killed in action, the specialists, the two staff sergeants, two sergeants first class, and the captain, none of them particularly fit Pete Hegseth's warrior archetype that he spent a year propagandizing to us, do they?
No. And they're citizen soldiers, right? These guardsmen. They're brought in for facilitation in the unsexy component that they think is of war, which is logistics, right? Paperwork, administration. And so this is why, I mean, this should be a national scandal. They didn't have overhead protection. Okay. Back in Baghdad in 2003, all of our connexes had overhead protection. The Iranians had been watching this for some time. They knew precisely where to strike. And they knew
it was
precisely
a Shahed.
with a Shahed drone, something they could have shot it down with a 50 cal. No self-defense, no CRAM anti-drone guns out there, not even a 45 caliber pistol with a guy on air watch, which I would have set, right? This is just mind-boggling, just how, Pete Hegseth's vision of what the armed forces is does not reflect the reality. We have citizen soldiers all over. The National Guard do full-scale combat missions, but Pete Hegseth is out there pretending like he's a team guy with the SEALs. He was a reservist. He was not a reservist. He was a guardsman too. And he had to beg, he had asked for an assignment with real Army combat units to go to Afghanistan, and now he thinks he's a special operator. Oh, God, it's disgusting.
That is a perfect place to leave it. Though, Ken, you have anything you want to wrap up with?
Well, Malcolm's got me spinning. Look, again, to those downrange and the family members of those downrange, very likely the orders you're getting are lawful, as Malcolm has said. They might also be stupid, but God, I hope you've got commanders who can be that filter for you. Until then, fight for your brothers and sisters, for your shipmates, for your airmen, for your wingmen. Do this for them, and remember your oath to the Constitution, not to the president, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
I just want to say one thing in response to that. I want to just assert on the record for the three of us that we have no affection for Iranian ayatollahs, mullahs, Iranian Revolutionary Guardsmen who have the blood of thousands of Americans on their hands. This is an evil, despotic regime. Our issue, and the issue of a lot of people looking at this objectively, is that we have an American administration that is actually incompetent enough to start a war against this despicable regime and lose that war. And that's what we're talking about here, is that 9 days in, we have blown up many things which we have the technological capacity to do. But we have not weakened, as Lindsey Graham said, the hold of the Iranian regime on Iran. And never in history has air power alone succeeded in taking and holding territory, ever. With that, what I would say is good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join the discussion, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.
You got it. Take care, guys.